Good morning, Brian. Nice to see you. I'm just going live on YouTube now. And so,
Hey, Ryan.
good morning, everyone. And good morning, Art. Whoops, Art one. Art. Art one twice. Let's see what I can do here. There we go. Wait a minute, what happened? Okay. Anyway, good morning, Art. We're here. Even though my fingers are messing me up and I didn't have quite enough of the chat on my screen so I could see what I was doing. But anyway, we're here and we're working with this book, Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Murray Stein and Thomas Arst. This is volume one of a 5-volume series. And this is going to be an interesting conversation today. And it's really cool that you have a t-shirt that says Led Zeppelin on it. Very appropriate. Okay.
Is that a new band?
Yeah.
So anyway, the part of this essay that we are starting to read now, it's a long essay. We did the first part of it last week. Good morning, Kathy. Nice to see you here today. The part of it we're reading today, or starting with today, is a title called A Book of Revelation. And before I start reading it, I just want to remind everyone of the Book of Revelation, which is the last book in the Bible. And that was written by a man named John of Patmos about 400 years after the time of Christ. And John had this incredible revelation, which was filled with archetypal images, as Dr. Jung points out. And it must have been incredibly overwhelming at the point of time in history when he did it, because that was long before there was anything like a psychologist or anything. There were a few holy men, as we know, but that vision that he had must have been quite something. And it compares with the vision of who is it? Who had the vision of the chariot with the eyes on the wheels and that sort
Ezekiel.
of Ezekiel, yeah, Ezekiel. Ezekiel's vision that goes back way back in the Old Testament. And you can see why they wrote these things down, because these were really monumental events in people's lives at the time that they were happening. But so anyway, Jung is in the midst in the Red Book, and particularly between December 25th, 1913, and about mid-March, so about a 10-week period, he is having an enormous revelation that's coming to him, and he's writing it back down in the black books. We know all that because we've read the whole Red Book here. But we're going to start with this section called A Book of Revelation by Lance Owens. Now, Lance Owens is a famous Jungian psychologist, and I think one of the co-founders of the so-called Gnostic Church. and the other founder was Stephen Heller. I don't know if they're both alive still. I know the last time I heard Stephen Heller's age, it was something like 95, so he may not still be alive. But in any case, the two of them founded something called the Gnostic Church. And it's my observation that they sort of missed the point because um, the new religion that Jung's talking about, the um, the new way of looking at the world does not require a brick and mortar church or any bishops. Stephen Heller used to um, style himself as a bishop of the Gnostic Church, as I recall. And uh, there is no need for bishops, no need for brick and mortar buildings, because we are talking about a religion and a church that's within each one of us, and it's in the unconscious. Um, and as I get deeper and deeper into this, I realize this more and more that um, you can create a red book, and that's a good thing for to jog your memory, and it may be something for others later on. But um, but specifically, anything that's in physical form is not really needed. Um, and I think Jung finally knew that. So, any comments on my preview here?
I'd say two things. The Sistine Chapel ceiling, where God is reaching down the finger to David, and if you look at it, the shape that God is in is a cross section, a sagittal section through the human brain, and it's very much Eye of Horus. It's very much literally just a sagittal section, just a cross section right through, where you see, if you look at the outline, it's very, once it's seen, you can't unsee it. And there's a literal inside the brain. And so that's this: God does not come from outside, comes from within. And it's kind of I've heard it called Michelangelo's lie, where he sneaks that in so big and so there, no one sees it.
Well, there's one other thing that it represents, and that's a womb.
Yeah.
It looks very much like a womb. And the other thing that Michelangelo uh, sneaked in, there are quite a few things in that ceiling, but one of them is that the gown, which is worn by God, is pink in color.
Which is Sakina or Sophia.
Yeah, right.
Well,
And
also to that womb idea, then that means the brain, the eternal internal divinity, is the living womb. We are constantly in transformation, so constantly.
precisely.
And so in that sense, we leave the darkness, the soulful darkness of the womb, to be born, and then through life we continually bring up those unconscious contents over and over.
Right. But nonetheless, all of us can feel the touch, the electricity and touch of God touching each one of us as we reach out our finger to be touched by God.
The second thing I wanted to mention on a more mundane level, I know on this channel over the years, I've pretty harshly disparaged Jordan Peterson over and over and over as being some Jungian disco ball. But I realized in the last, say, 6 or 8 weeks, that was all from pre his breakdown. There were all these quotes, and the media would continue to do that. If I look at all of his new stuff, he's on fire, and he's really a powerful force for what's real and right and true. So I
Yeah.
think it's, even that, I changed my mind pretty sternly, with a chuckle at the same time at myself, because I was holding on to what I knew, but not what was now.
Well, Jordan Peterson was holding on and before his breakdown. And I recently saw in the last even 2 to 4 weeks, I saw a 3.5 minute clip in which he talks about C.G. Jung and the Red Book. And he's really got it. He's grokked it now. And he really understands it in the right context. And I'm not sure whether that particular video clip actually comes from before his breakdown or after. I certainly, before his breakdown, I certainly never heard him uh, say anything like this. But anyways, someone may have gone back and found this clip where he had connected with the Red Book and now understands what's happening to all of us.
I wonder if it was the same one I saw too, that he said Freud indicated that we were haunted by ghosts, whereas Jung indicated we were haunted by gods and demons, which was far more intense and far more accurate.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to go to Lance Owens' essay and read and comment on it. This section of this essay, called from C.G. Jung and the Prophet Puzzle, is called A Book of Revelation. Is Liber Novus a revelation? During several decades lecturing and teaching about C.G. Jung's life and work, I have found that the words vision, revelation, and prophecy are noxious reactants when cast into any alembic of academic discourse, even when added in homeopathic dilution. These words reek of rancid superstition. They have long since passed. It seems their scholastic sell-by date, long since passed, it seems, their scholastic sell-by date. Okay, so these words are vision, revelation, and prophecy. They have, nonetheless, in the Black Book journals and in comments transcribed by Agnella Jaffe in 1957, Jung did speak of Liber Novus as having been elaborated in the form of a revelation. He did avow that he had seen visions, and later in life he did expound at length on the prophetic message of his new book. Now, I dispute the name of this book. Okay, people keep calling it Liber Novus. Even some Shamdasani did. And I've seen some images that suggest that Liber Novus was on the back spine of the original Red Book. It is not, and I've previously showed on this channel. I'll probably find it again. An image of the Red Book, and you can see very clearly that the words new book are not on the back spine. And the reason I resist it is because Dr. Jung would never have suggested that his book was anything like a New Testament, which is what that suggests. Liber Novus suggests it's a New Testament, and I dispute that absolutely. And so even though I'm reading the words Liber Novus here, I do not concur that that was Jung's intention. And as I understand it, throughout his life, he always referred to it as the Red Book. And so to say Jung rejected the archaic role of prophet is, of course, both accurate and completely insufficient. This is a crucial issue in understanding Jung, his Liber Novus, and his hermeneutics of vision. Simply proclaiming, no, he didn't do that, is no solution at all. Among the previously unseen source materials, Dr. Sona Shamdasani provided in the editorial apparatus of Liber Novus is section from Jung's journal dated 5 January 1922, in which Jung entered a conversation with his soul about his vocation. At the time of this journal entry, Jung had worked for 7 years on the transcription and illumination of his Liber Novus manuscripts into the big red leather covered folio volume. He would continue the effort for at least 7 more years. This journal entry illustrates how he perceived his book in the midst of that labor. Jung had been unable to sleep and addressed his soul, asking why. She said there was no time to sleep. He had great work to begin. He must go to a higher level of consciousness. Jung asked, "What is it? Speak." And then here's a quote from the soul. "You should listen. To no longer be a Christian is easy, but what next? What more is yet to come? Everything is waiting for you. And you remain silent and have nothing to say, but you should speak. Why have you received the revelation? You should not hide it. You concern yourself with the form. Is the form important? When it is a matter of revelation, Jung, but you are not thinking that I should publish what I have written in Liber Novus. That would be a misfortune, and who would understand it?" Unquote. 3 days later, his soul explained further, "You know, everything is to be known about the manifested revelation, but you do not yet live everything that is to be lived at this time. The way is symbolic." He had received the manifest revelation, but still he struggled with the proper form for its expression. 35 years after that journal entry, Jung affirmed to Aniela Jaffe, quote, "The Red Book is an attempt at an elaboration of the imaginal events in the sense of revelation," quote unquote. So go ahead.
What came to me is the black books are the unconscious books, the soul books. And rather than going black, white, yin, yang, the red book is both and life, red, living life. So I have never thought about it that way before, but getting out of the either or, where he's playing a both and game from black to white, dark to light, I think it's black womb to red life. And in that sense, when in the sense of revelation of the imaginal events, where then similar to intuition, reasons are always unreasonable. If I can put words on my intuition, it's wishful thinking. But if I just keep it as that fuel in my gut that is the heart of the matter of my actions, the reasons are unreasonable and I just navigate. So I'm thinking black books, soul inside the womb, transcend both and black, white, yin, yang, and then go to red book, living blood, living life.
And even alchemical too, because then it's Liber Rubius, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so there's an interesting exchange here on the YouTube channel. Roberta Harvey says, "Good day to you all, and I made it at 7 minutes in. Happy to be here for some good reason." Jordan Peterson, and I didn't know all this. So thank you for bringing him to my attention today. Here, not here, not HEAR, but here. Tuning in from windy Portugal. Richard Casper says, Jordan, I'm curious, who is the father of your pantheon of gods? And Roberta says, archaic has more than one meaning. Kathy Kerr says, Richard, I am curious, who is the mother of creation? And Roberta says, a book by Terence McKenna and Food of the Gods gives another definition of archaic. Richard, Kathy, there is no mother of creation. God bore us from his breath. Kathy, Richard, I see. No wonder humanity is so lonely. And Richard says, who's lonely? Okay, comments on this?
Well, the father of my pantheon of gods is me. Now, before I was out of adolescence, it was probably something in some ecclesiastical scripture that I was striving for, reaching for, externally trying to get. That's transactional. And it reminds me of just relationship progress through life, where when you're young, Y-O-U-N-G, not J-U-N-G, you know, you think if my needs are met, this is a healthy relationship. Well, because you're still in that childlike place. Then later, if my needs are met and her needs are met, oh, now it's a healthy relationship. But no, that's transactional. Then there's, if her needs are my needs and my needs are her needs, we together do this. There's the divinity of what's a living relationship. And I think that therefore then the father of my pantheon of God and the mother, they're both me. You know, I have sacred generative, left feminine, sacred formative, right masculine. Together, that's me, all three. And that reminds me of Egyptian symbology. The number one is not a quantity one. The number one in Egyptian symbology is a quantity three. There has to be a trinity to compose every identity. So back to the father of my pantheon, that would be me, you know, post-adolescence and post-age 42, when I birthed the rest of my life my way. I think that's important. And it's not an egomaniacal statement. I think it's simply I lead and I navigate, and no one's coming to save me. I can't petitionally pray to, you know, oh, please help me. That's God as the adult version of Santa Claus. And, you know, I think that's not what's going on. I think as Debbie, Skip, your wife put it, the disappearing path.
Mm-hmm.
Someone last week said, oh, you're really on the path. And I said, absolutely not. There's, you know, the Egyptian proverb of, you know, may the ground always rise up to support your every step. And I say, just like the fool, especially when there was no ground there before, if I'm stepping out onto solid ground, that's just acceptable risk. And that's just playing it safe. But if I'm able to navigate my car and not have to have a conversation with myself to go around the duck that's crossing the road, well, metaphorically, that example, if I do that in life, the way I'm living it, to me, it's much more healthy. I'm not dealing with blocks. If there's a roadblock, I'll reach out and pick it up and stick it in my pocket. That's just a problem I'm not capable of solving yet. So it's you know, how dare life interrupt my momentum? Again, not egomaniacal. This is my momentum. And I don't want that roadblock, because that's me expecting something. And, you know, it's the old quote of when you're tired, you fight demons you've already long ago conquered. So at that point, father of my pantheon, mother of my pantheon of God, I'd say me. I mean, thoughts from you guys from those comments on the YouTube channel?
Yeah. Brian, did you have any comment here?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm as clearly explicit as you are, Jordan, but you know, having been stuck in my life previously and then sort of being forced to get unstuck. I mean, the whole reason how I got into med school is inexplicable. So what I would say is it was definitely like the fool. I stepped out onto nothing, or that image in the Indiana Jones and is it the Holy Grail? The one
Yeah.
where it looks like it's a chasm, but there's actually a bridge,
Hmm.
and he
Yes.
has to step out into nothing. Um, those kinds of things I think are real. I think if people reflect on their lives, they may be able to say, there have been times in my life where that happened, and the relationship that you have to have inside, um, because it is foolish. It's completely foolish to do this inner directed process, to initiate it and to see it through. I think that's I think that's the sort of experience of gnosis, where
Yeah.
if you took all what's shown to you as rational and what you've been taught to think as rational, and to follow the rules and do what's expected, et cetera, that I think that when you have to set all that stuff aside and it's just you in the universe,
Right.
and there's all sorts of wisdom tradition, like one day at a time, et cetera, that I think that space anyway, um, of making a commitment. There's a quote by shoot he wrote the Scottish Himalayan expedition, but basically nothing happens until you commit, and so there's an exchange, but it's not transactional, if you
Right.
will.
That's beautiful. I
Well,
remember
and it's transcendent.
it is transcendent, and I
Yeah.
remember someone saying, "Why are you shutting your architecture firm down to go full-time tarot? I mean, come on, shouldn't you let it support you first to see?" And I said, "It's been doing that for 6 months. I didn't see it for 6 months because it's not a real job, right? I'm going to run off with the circus." And but then there's the go stand in your garden and look at a dahlia, which is like the amateur thousand petal lotus in a way, and you're going, "Oh, I've been growing this, telling myself this, non-verbally telling myself this, how many years in this naturalized garden?" And I think your response is so wonderfully explicit with even the single example of that invisible disappearing path that appears as he steps, and then he becomes more comfortable with his own stepping. And I think there's a whole getting your new driver's license of self to, oh, what's the worst that can happen? I fall and die? Well, then I'm not going to care anymore. So I might as well continue to do it my way and, play the whole Frank Sinatra song with it. So I think that I really like that you brought up that invisible path and Indiana Jones going across to the cave, across the alleged chasm, the inspect what you expect, because your expectations are blind spots. And in that example, in that scene, literally. So you have to step where you deeply know and have no basis in fact. And kind of a little bit reminds me of the amygdala, the reptilian part of your brain. And people say, oh, fight, flight, freeze. I'm like, sure, but it's not all three of those individually. I think the fight, flight, freeze is one structure that self-resolves, and you don't fight, you don't freeze, and you don't fly. I think it's an inner indication that everything up to that point, stop. You need to come outside. This is the inner reptile going, hey, you're going to trip on that concrete crack and you're going to fall and you're going to hit your chin. And a friend of mine who's a psychologist penned it so perfectly. I told her that, and she said, oh, well, you know what I call the amygdala? I'm like, well, what's that? She goes, I never spell it anymore. It's not AMYGDALA. It's just that bitch, Amy, and she's not in your best interest. And what it is to me, that's the inner knowing, literally reptilian, that says, hey, you're too inside, come outside. There are sensory awareness things you need to take note of. And, you're in danger, whether it's a crack in the concrete or some shady character peeking around the corner, there's not a whole lot of difference conceptually, because then the inner and the outer become in danger. So I think back to the poetic example you used of that Indiana Jones scene. Everything I said, you encapsulated in the specifics of that invisible bridge, or invisibridge as it would be, which is just literally like a synapse between two neurons. And that's, one side and the other side. And then there's this, it's not a leap of faith, it's an energetic flight from place to place. So in a sense, that bridge is the invisible verb of every action. That's the driver. This side and that side will never change probably throughout your life, your interests, but how you get there, that's always in flux.
Right. Well, I want to talk about something a little different. I think the answer has to do with the fact that God is a mystery. Okay. All the rules that we live by come from that mystery. But in the end, you cannot get back to it. You can only know it. And when you know it, there's no substitute for that. Okay, I'm going to describe that in a couple of images. First of all, in January, I commissioned Tim Holmes, our sculptor friend, to create a sculpture that embodies the first verse of the Navy hymn. And the Navy hymn is otherwise entitled Eternal Father. And the verse goes like this. And I'm not going to sing it because I get too emotional when I try to sing it. I may not be able to even speak it because it's meant so much to me my whole life. But I'll just recite it. Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm hath bound the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. O hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. So Tim did up some sketches. I'm going to show you one of the sketches. And he's now completed the sculpture, but unfortunately it's still in clay form, and it's not going to be available until October. We're going to be casting it in bronze in a series of up to 50. And of course, we can sell it to anyone. The indication price of the bronze in small version, in room size version, is going to be about $2,000. It's going to cost it's going to cost us $1,600 or $1,400 for every casting. And so the balance is for Tim. I am taking no part in the proceeds. But I'm just going to give a hint of this now, because I want the unconscious to be aware that it's coming. And in October, I intend to offer number one in the series of 50 to the Alumni Association of the Naval Academy. That's my current intent. And I am going to take number three, and that's based on something I had learned in a Christian Bible camp when I was in the Cub Scouts, which was God is first, everyone else is second, and I am third. And so I've taken item number 3 of now, it'll be 2 of Tim's works. The other one is the water bearer. And so here is his drawing that I'm going to share with you right now. This is just to indicate an indication of what he's done. So here he's captured the peril of being at sea, and in a small boat. We're all at sea in a small boat, and and we have to rely on God to see us through. And so here the oarsman is pulling through a massive wave that he can barely manage, and yet he knows that if he keeps pulling, that he will make it through. And that God has bound the restless wave. In other words, there are limits of the wave, but there are also limits of the boat, and there are also limits of the person, and there are also limits of everything. Okay, so I'm going to take that off the screen now.
Actually,
But
can you put that back up on the screen?
okay.
Yeah, there's just a wicked cool synchronicity with Brian's example of the invisible bridge, where we don't live in the hesitation on the left side at the edge of that chasm. We live not in the hesitation, in the synapse in between. So there's this
on the brink.
And then the thing is, that means we live in the actions, not in the hesitations, not in the ruminations, not in, et cetera, shuns. But there's this whole white space. And then the darker, more focused piece is life, looking back up, self-reflecting, looking back up to the left, to the unconscious, to that previous, in a sense of, hey, this is where we're going.
Nor do we live in the substance either.
Right.
What's that?
Nor do we live in the substance either.
Exactly.
Not just the hesitation.
We live in the space between.
Right.
Because in a sense, the one side of the chasm is gestation, as it were. You're thinking about doing something. And then there's the doing of it, which, the snake, its skin shedded, the snake, its skin not missed. You don't get to go, oh, I meant to. Well, no, that's not, the intention's overrated. That's not the way it came across. So if you hesitate, then in the action, you start to sink, and that's the sketch, just such a synchronicity with Brian's example of the invisible bridge, because all that whole space, including the darker boat below, is that unseen place to the one looking back, rowing.
Mm-hmm.
And even then rowing, crew, where people are rowing, they don't see where they're going. The captain at the back does, but they're rowing into nothingness. They're simply acting. So even with crew, there's a metaphor of that action.
Yeah. You have to do what you have to do. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I'd say you just pull. One of the mysteries that I think everyone is confronted with the sea metaphor is that we do in fact witness those who founder on the sea. And the idea that the outer God preserves us that protects us, on the sea, we witness, those who founder, those, America's full of people relatively young people who have overdosed over and over and over. And, other kinds of self-destructive things and other kinds of violence and organized violence like war. And so in that thought, what is your sense of the having witnessed, those who founder and our trust in being born?
That's a really good question. It reminds me of it's hard to be a prophet in your own hometown. And the reason is you empathize and equate yourself with your neighbor, and your neighbor's not so much, which means you're not so much, except the reality is it's mostly you're not so much, so maybe your neighbor can't be so much. So when they do something amazing, oh, well, he mows his lawn on Tuesdays. So that's about all you'll give them. But then someone over there outside your whole circle does something and, oh my God, that's amazing, I'm going to aspire to that. Comes back to situational awareness of, do I value myself enough to enhance, reinforce, and strengthen the power of my life instead of muting it relative to, oh, well, he failed, that looks dangerous, and that's a gambler's thinking, where, oh, well, the odds are against me because everyone else in the neighborhood that they failed, they floundered. So I should be afraid. I should move on and do something different. Like, oh, I'll mow my lawn on Wednesday. Where, no, I'm going to rip out the lawn and plant creeping thyme, and I'm going to do something completely different. So I think the whole witnessing of people floundering can be negative because even though it may be similar to our lives, it's not actually relative because we make the rules. We are the ones who are acting. And the old Chinese proverb, those who say it can't be done should really do well to get out of the way of the person doing
it. So I love a quote that appears in the movie The Imitation Game, in which this phrase is used a number of times, and the phrase is, it's always the ones who no one imagines anything of, who do the things that no one ever imagined. Okay. And so I'm not a graduate of the Naval Academy. My father was. But this hymn has been very deep meaning in my life for all of my life since I was 10 years old. I first ran into it at Naval Air Station, Norfolk, where the people in that chapel really had skin in the game because at that time, which was in the late 50s, that airport was the busiest airport in the world, even busier than O'Hare. This was before O'Hare started to take off. And there was a landing or takeoff every 3 minutes, 24 hours a day at that Naval Air Station. And the reason was that we were worried about Russian submarines, and the submarine chasers of the Navy were flying out of that airport, to defend the most important naval base on the East Coast of the United States. And even at 10 years old, I could feel the emotion in the singing of the hymn, not because I was singing it, because I didn't know the words. In fact, the memory I have is of having fallen asleep on the pew next to my mother, and she stood up to sing the hymn, and sort of I woke up to this hymn as I was hearing it. I still have that memory very clearly. And so, and there's a fact here that is that my father spent the entirety of World War II in the Naval Academy. Okay, he literally, my grandfather wanted to figure out a way to get him in the Naval Academy. He went to his congressman to see if he could get an appointment, and the answer was no. But he couldn't get a political appointment, but he could get in through um, other means. And they take about half of the people that go to the Naval Academy come from the fleet, from the actual fleet. And so my father was advised to join the Navy Reserve in 1940, which he did. He joined the Navy as a sailor. He was in the reserve, and he then went to Penn, the University of Pennsylvania, for 1 year. And then he was appointed, or then he got picked up to go to the Naval Academy in 1942. So here is the beginning of World War II. Just after the Battle of Midway is when he was showing up at the Naval Academy as an 18-year-old. And he graduated. He was in the class of 46, but he graduated in 45 because they were speeding up the classes at that time to get more officers through. So he was there for 3 years, graduated May of 45, almost to the day the signing of the European armistice at the end of World War II. And so, in a sense, I owe my very life to the Naval Academy, to its existence. And because, there were lots of guys that went out, the class of 43, took the brunt of it because they went out as ensigns in 1943 and were in the biggest battles, naval battles of World War II. And their ships were attacked by kamikazes in the whole 9 yards. And a man who won the Medal of Honor in the class of 45, or who he graduated in 45, but he was the class, or not, he graduated in 44 because he was the class of 45. He got to the fleet in time for his ship to be attacked by a kamikaze. And he won the Medal of Honor because he brought men up out of the engine room, which was on fire, 10 of them, and saved their lives, and suffered terrible burns himself. And it was years later, my father didn't even know he had survived. He won the Medal of Honor. And years later, I was in high school with his daughter. And so that's how I know this story. And when he died, I was overseas at the time and couldn't come back, but Debbie went to his funeral at the Naval Academy. But all last fall, something was telling me that something had to be done about the Navy hymn, specifically for the Naval Academy, but for everyone who's ever served at sea, actually, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Merchant Marine, or anybody that went to sea in ships to fish or whatever, what have you. And so I envisioned this statue, of which what we have now is the maquette, the model of the statue. And so I'm going to show you now what Tim's vision of this is, fully installed. And this is the model in front of the chapel at the Naval Academy. And Tim made a small mistake on this because, and he had a perilous experience on the sea too. So he used the phrase "peril on the sea" in this image before he had talked to me, and I'll explain to you in a moment why that is not doesn't work. It's geez, I gotta figure out how to get back to my
It's
images.
interesting. Hey, you have two examples there again of Brian's invisible bridge,
Right.
or Invisibridge, where all the way up to last fall, you were on that precipice of sorts, probably had a horizon infinitely away. And then came fall, and there came to be the point of action, which was not presaged or prefigured in the previous. And then also your grandfather, who goes through all this military training in the Naval Academy.
No, he didn't go through it. My father went through it.
Your father went through it.
Right.
And then gets to the point of graduation to no war. So war's over. And so interestingly enough, then his whole on the precipice was the action of training with the expectation of this will continue directly. Then he graduates and the war's over. And so he has this invisible bridge, disappearing path in front of him to move into the rest of his life, but right. Not in World War II, in the post portion.
Right. I'm just looking for, shoot, I sent him a picture, later picture. I'll have to look for it, but the correct caption for that image is Eternal Father Strong to Save, because among other things, those are the first 5 words of the poem. And
Eternal Father, what's the next word?
Strong to save. Yeah. And let's see if I've got it here. I might have. Yes, here we are. Okay. So this is just going to explain why that has to be on the bottom of the thing. Just pushing the wrong buttons here. Okay, where is it here? All right, so this is what's in the chapel above the altar. Okay, and now what's above the altar here is a Tiffany window. This is a window done by Tiffany. This is not the famous window that is in my previous images of another Tiffany window. There are 2. This one is directly above the altar, and as you can see, the first words of the Navy hymn are inscribed here above the altar, and the other Tiffany window is in the arm that's on the to your left as you're facing the altar. But that's why the words on the image have to be Eternal Father Strong to Save. but my point is this: everything is bound by rules set by the Eternal Father. Okay. The scientific method only discovers rules that were already there. It does not create a rule, a new rule. It simply discovers rules. So if you think about anything that you know of in science, none of that was created by a human being. None, zero. None of the rules that they use was created by a human being. All of those rules were prefigured at the beginning, at the time of the Big Bang. They were all there. And the scientific method only discovers these rules and talks about them, but sometimes there are exceptions. Now, there's one other thing that I want to talk about here, and that is I was looking at Colleen Kuber's book again this morning, which is called Art and Spirit. And I love this book, but in the part about Japan, she shows this sculpture that she did. Wait a minute, I guess I have to get rid of my background here, sorry. Okay, so this sculpture that she did, and it's installed in Santa Cruz, California, in bronze, and it's called Kimono Sai. And so the significance of this particular image is you'd have to grok it in order to fully appreciate it, but what you know is that Colleen's spirit is there, but her physical body is not. And so if you not understand what I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, then you might grok what Colleen meant by that. When I first looked at it, I said, why did she put an empty?
Your video froze right after why did she put a
Completes a work of art is some physical object, in this case, the kimono that she wore in Japan when she went to something called the Omoto community for training about these things. And
your video froze right after you said, why did she put an imp? And you stopped. I didn't know if it was EMP, IMP.
why did she put a what?
Why did she put a imp? And you stopped.
Why did she put an image?
Image, okay.
Without her in it? And the answer is that her spirit is there, but not the physical thing of, well, the kimono is there. That's a physical thing, but she's not. And that's what happens with all artists, that they put their spirit into a work of art. And in the case of the work that I've commissioned from Tim, and we still have a fair amount of work to do on it, because we're going to have 50 maquettes to sell that are bronze. I think there are enough people that the C means enough to them so that will be not a problem. There are about 1,000 graduates of the Naval Academy every year. So there's a lot of graduates, plus there's the Coast Guard Academy, Merchant Marine Academy, and everybody that's been at sea in a fishing boat or whatever, or even a small boat. In my case, I had a perilous experience when I was 12 in a sailfish, believe it or not, or not in it because I wasn't in it. It sailed away from me.
That's a metaphor.
Yeah, it sailed away from me. The boat sailed away, and it literally came back to me. It literally came back, um, and saved my life. And because that was at a time that we weren't wearing life vests when we did recreational boating. But um, anyway, Tim says to create the bigger piece at the Naval Academy, we'd need about $150,000. So I'm going to be looking for a class or somebody that wants to make a major gift to the Naval Academy who can afford that kind of money. I figure it can be a class gift. But anyway, that's where we are in our process right now. So part of the point here is that it's not only the artist, because when that bronze is there, my spirit is going to be in there too. And I'm one of the ones that no one imagined anything of, because I'm not even a graduate of the Naval Academy, and I wasn't a naval officer. I was a Marine officer. But still, this hymn, I cannot even really talk about it without getting emotional. And so I know that it's numinous to me, and it must be to many, many other people. Okay.
To include Colleen's, I'm there in spirit, not in body. Well, then back to Brian's Invisibridge. On that brink, the spirit is that space between in the body. The body now moving is no longer going to be on the brink. The spirit is left in memory, but you continue to have that spirit inside as you move forward. So I think, thinking about it, focusing so much on that verb, the space between, the synapse, the Invisibridge, it's not meant to disparage the corporeal, the body on the brink. That has the inner also, and in a sense, it's going towards its inner by going across the chasm.
Yeah, and I just make one more point, and that is that it doesn't, if you cannot produce a work of art, and I always thought that I might do some sculpture, but I found that I couldn't because it dried out my hands too much. But I know a world-renowned sculptor named Tim Holmes who could execute my vision here. And so this is actually, both of our spirits are in it. And so it's very complicated, but in any case, that's where we are. We should go on with Lance, but any further comment before I do that?
Amelia has come aboard.
Amelia, how are you? Good to see you. Did you have any comment about what we were saying? Did you come aboard especially for that, or?
No, so I almost I almost died in a plane crash.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, there was turbulence and I almost crashed over Montgomery, which is the slip where the Young Society of New York City is located. So that was my man and his symbols moment.
Oh wow. And you were flying the plane, or?
No, I was on a plane. I was headed to the south. And all of a sudden there was this was around like March,
Mhm.
And the turbulence was so bad that people were flying across the aisle. The flight attendant got a concussion. I mean, it was such a nightmare. And then when I came back, that whole week was just stories and news about people getting injured. But I wanted to share with you also. I've been kind of reading on and off Ignatius Loyola, the mystic.
Yep.
And
Ignatius Loyola. Yeah.
yeah, Ignatius. The medieval prayer, The Soul of Christ, Anima Christi, provides an excellent summary of his mysticism of the cross. It reads, Soul of Christ, sanctify me. Body of Christ, save me. Blood of Christ, inebriate me. Water from the side of Christ, wash me. Passion of Christ, strengthen me. O good Jesus, hear me. Within thy wounds hide me. Suffer me not to be separated from thee. From the malignant enemy, defend me. And in the hour of my death, call me. And bid me to come to thee, that with thy saints I may rise thee forever and ever. Amen. So I think, just letting that sink in. In Jordan's point, a lot of people, they just don't believe in any God. They don't believe in any higher power. They just live day to day, maybe for survival, or maybe they're tired of hearing about God, or they've never had a relationship with God. But for me, as someone who grew up in a very religious household, anywhere I turned, I think of it as, I always tell someone when they ask me, what religion are you? I tell them, have you ever, in high school, have you ever read a book like maybe Black Boy? And everyone in the classroom had a different understanding of the book.
Mhm.
And they would respond with, well, yeah, the book and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, you know that the book was originally, when it was published, it was condensed. And then when it was like this thick. And then when it was published, it was, when it was republished, the original manuscript was this thick. So a lot of it, and I used to have the original one, the approved publication without all the communism stuff in there and whatnot. And so everyone had a different understanding of it. And some people really thought maybe this book was political, while others thought, well, this is a story about a boy and his life during these historical events. So many people understood the book in a different way. And that's with anything in life. That's just a person's perception based on their perspective of life, based on their own experiences. And then also, Jordan, this made me think of you. I don't know if you can see it, but it's from my bazooka gum. It goes, where were you? I had a haircut. Don't you know you can't get a haircut on company time? Well, it grew on company time.
Nice. Yeah, that I love that kind of defiance, because it's actually not defiant. It's just not answering to some alleged external authority. I mean, that you remind me of something that happened last week. I'm surprised it hasn't happened more, but a woman walked up to my table and leaned up, and for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a tarot professional. She leaned up against the stairs and she said, do you believe in this? And I said, that sounds like a preamble to a further question. What are you asking? And she said, you need to find Jesus Christ as your savior. And I looked at her and I said, so you've asked me no questions and know nothing about me whatsoever, whether this is at odds with Christianity or not. She said, well, You need to find Jesus Christ. And honestly, I was not in the mood to deal with a heckler. And I just said, oh, I didn't know he was lost. So, that reminds me of your bazooka, where I'm like, he grew on company time, So, I mean, there was I won't even call it personal authority. It was, how dare you walk in and presumptuously tell me something that I'm supposed to believe? Like, oh, you can't cut your hair on company time. And then the guy comes back with, well, it grew on company time. So, I like that you brought up the cartoon there, because I think there's a whole lot in that, where someone says you have to choose A or B. There's always a third option. And, there's always a third
I'm
option.
sorry you went through that. It's always you,
Oh,
Jordan.
I think I actually, one of the shop owners came up later. He said, I've been 30 minutes trying to contain my laughter until she left my shop. He said, that was just hilarious. And he said, and I'm a full boat Christian. That was even funnier, because she was just rude. And so, I mean, it's the kind of thing where I could have said, I don't believe in this any more than my range or my fridge and my kitchen. But that would be the truth. And you don't give the truth to a heckler, you smack them down. And, you smack them down with laughter, because then it's not smacking them, it's just smacking what they said. And it kind of reminds me of that violence is not always the answer. In fact, rarely. But the old samurai sitting down and said, well, man who has mosquito land on testicles, learn quickly, violence not first course of best action.
Well, love is always the answer.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
question?
and I think a lot of people believe that and then don't lead with that. They lead with some pokey, sparky, caustic interview test. And I'm sorry, but I'm not interviewing with anybody. I mean, you can ask me questions out of curiosity and wonderment, but if you come up, like that, she basically had quiet guns blazing. You could just see in her eyes this whole, I'm going to try to proselytize and convert. And I'm sorry, but I'm not a currency, so I don't need to change to a different value. Give me the Australian dollars, please. No, I'll keep my currency just in the form it is.
I've especially felt very uncomfortable after 9/11 within my Muslim community, because of the violence and the association between terrorism and Islam. And I remember growing up after 9/11, people used to joke around like, Allahu Akbar, and I'd be like, what are you saying? Because people have this misconception and misunderstanding of what's happening. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure. I'm so confused, with and that's why I guess I'm so interested in the mind, is because people kind of stray from God and from my understanding and from from the way that I practice my religion. People stray from God, yet they keep running back to God, and I've seen this so many times. I've seen people, go into these cults and practice this and that and pervert everything and become extremists and whatever. Especially one man who I had recently met. I never knew him until last weekend. And he was talking about how before he became a born again Christian, that he was a gangster and he was selling drugs and even involved in homicide, like a lot of crimes, very serious crimes. And then later on in his life, he found Jesus. And so I felt a little bit like I wasn't really buying it. It takes a lot for me. I used to work in sales, so I wasn't really buying it. I'm like, it's not really working for me. So I asked him, well then, you know, God this and God that, but what about the devil? What do you think about the devil? You know, uh, because don't you think the devil has a job to do too, right? Isn't he like the subordinate of God? And he responded with, always, always, yeah, the devil always has a job to do. He's got a very serious job to do. And I asked him, what is your relationship with the devil? And he paused. No one had ever asked him that question before. This was his revelation or a moment of enlightenment, I guess, because he went from standing on the bus to now sitting down, and he had his King James version of the Bible, which was in Spanish, closed with both of his hands on top of the Bible, and he just looked straight ahead, all confused. And I was confused. I'm like, what, you know, what? No one's ever asked him this question. And at that point, I said to myself, okay, now I need to stop, because this is the serious question that I asked this man. And you know, people, they jump in. It's like when you win the lottery, I guess in this case, he won the lottery and he's like, yes, I'm liberated. But is he really liberated? Because sometimes don't we have to fall down and be in that darkest place where we feel God's fury, and overcome that to, you know, as Dr. Owens said in that California presentation, you know, you find something and you think it's one thing, but someone else says it's something else. But what is it really? And then again, it's all in the mind, right? When I was watching the Secret, there's two books on the Secret, but when I was watching The Secret, there was this one woman who said that she was very desperate, or one of the people in the documentary was talking about how they lost a lot in their life, and then they found, after losing all hope, they found a pebble, and it was this little tiny pebble that fit in the palm of their hand that gave them all the hope in the world. And I guess for them, it consciously symbolized to them something so small, that small effort, that small piece of hope that they have means the whole world.
You've got a lot in there, because I mean the end point is, you know, they who take care of the little things will be given much. But back to your, you know, what's that guy's relationship with Satan? I think Satan is sitting back with Sun Tzu in The Art of War, saying, I don't need to do anything. Don't interrupt anyone while they're making a mistake. Don't interrupt your enemy while they're making a mistake, you know. And what happens then is there's this whole, I found Jesus or X, Y, or Z. Well, look at the cloak of taking responsibility, trying to hide under, oh no, freeze tag as a kid. Oh, I got to home base. You can't touch me anymore. You know, I found Jesus. I'm immune. And I think what's interesting about that is a lot of people will, you know, they get to a point of uncomfortability at the edge of that brink, and they put it out on something else. Oh, if I only say this, everyone will stop bothering me. Well, they're bothering you because you were mean and rude and cruel, and that is weakness. So I think what's interesting to me is people who literally find solace and bliss in that discovery of divinity. Okay, but I don't kneel before myself, and I'm certainly not going to kneel before other. To me, it's rather than kneeling, it's stand up large, as big as you can. And that's nature. And then you're dancing with nature instead of trying to appease some invisible force to make yourself feel better. I really don't want to feel better. I want to not waste trouble. I want to find the treasure in the trouble. And I'm probably, I may say that all the time, and I'm probably the eye in my storm less than I'm not. But knowing that I can be is enough to venture out. So I think, your piece there, it's a wonderful, what's the relationship with, well, you put him in the space between, and that you had the maturity to stop and give him the space to just be silent. And, you put him somewhere. He was allowing himself to go. So that sounds like, the contemplative piece there was a pretty sacred exchange that you facilitated, where both hands on the Bible, not just your right hand. This was not just anyway. So I'll pause there.
Right.
Thank you so much.
So there's quite a conversation going on the YouTube channel here, and I'm not going to read it all, but I do want to bring to your attention a couple of things. One is that Christopher Raymond has told us that in the book of Romans, chapter 2, verse 15, says God's law is written on our hearts. We intuitively know what is right and wrong. Live correctly, God implores us to do. Okay. And that's very good. And then Kathy Kerr says, in the picture of Dorian Gray, he said he couldn't sell his art because he put too much of himself into it. And he may have been somewhat like me in the sense that when I was doing portraits, I could only paint the dark side of my subjects. And so I stopped because I didn't have enough skill as a painter to make them look beautiful, even though maybe they weren't particularly beautiful when they were sitting for me.
Well, then when you're doing that, you're, seeing the unseen, making manifest the other.
Right, exactly. And that's not a commercial thing to do. So
Well, yeah, Colleen always says, God help the artist who has a gimmick. It's like,
yeah, sure.
I'm not an assembly line,
Right. Okay, so we're going to go on now, and we're in the next section of Lance Owens' story here, which is called Jung and the Prophet Puzzle. And this section is called An Ethical Obligation. In his introduction to Liber Novus, Sonasham Dasani documented that during the early 1920s, Jung continued correcting and amending the typescript drafts of Liber Novus, and publication of the book was then still under consideration. But there was an insurmountable impediment to publication. Who would understand it? Around 1928, Jung began to realize that another course was both possible and necessary. Before his book could be exposed, he needed to establish a hermeneutics, a new interpretive approach, to visionary works such as his own. Sonasham Dasani has described the following years of labor as Jung's effort to elucidate a psychology of the religion-making process and to produce a comparable study of the individuation process. This period of work, extending until about 1944, the fateful year of Jung's grave illness and near-death visions, may constructively be understood as the essential next phase in Jung's hermeneutic exercise. The foundational task was the crystallization of his visionary experience into word and image. But in order for coming generations to comprehend Liber Novus, the molten magma of vision he worked to form and from which he extracted his science, an entirely new interpretive approach to imaginative experience was required. Essentially, everything Jung wrote from 1916 onward was oriented to creating an interpretive modus that could meet the seeming madness of his Liber Novus. What emerged in this next phase of Jung's work was an organic development, a necessary additional stratum in his extended hermeneutics of vision. His writings during this time constitute a major portion of the published collected works. Readers of those volumes, however, were heretofore granted little understanding of what the man was actually doing or why he was doing it. In remarks recorded by Agnella Jaffe on 3 October 1957, Jung stated that the development of his science, which implicitly included his comparative study of the individuation process and the religion-making process, was in fact an ethical obligation laid upon his shoulders by Liber Novus. In preparation for her biography of Jung between September 1956 and May 1958, Agnella Jaffe conducted a series of interviews with him. Jaffe made careful stenographic records of Jung's spontaneous and wide-ranging statements during these sessions. Her transcript of Jung's remarks fills 391 typed pages and is available in the Library of Congress. Unfortunately, many things Jung said to Jaffe were excluded from the heavily edited text of Memory Stream's Reflections. The transcript of the session on 3 October 1957 includes several examples of crucially important remarks that were not conveyed in the now quasi-canonical memoir Jaffe compiled. Jung began his comments that day by stating his visions had taken him in mind or spirit a few hundred years into the future. He added, "That is why I am considered wise." Jung recounted that by engaging in his visions, he had figuratively fallen into an immense hole. His merit was, he supposed, that he had not been lost in it. From the visions and dreams, his science came into being. Science was the frightful means by which he wriggled out of the hole. Nonetheless, he added, images such as he had met imposed a tremendous obligation. Quote, "They come to a man with supremacy," unquote. If one does not regard the knowledge imparted by such things as an ethical obligation, one falls into the trap of magic. When the ethical obligation is not seen, the knowledge thereby gained can be destructive. It can destroy the person and others. Jung continued describing to Jaffe several events in Liber Novus: his fear during the visionary encounter with the devil and his struggle to heal Izdubar. The god from the east, whom he had stricken unto death with his modernity, concluding he gave a summary description of in his Red Book. Quote, "The Red Book is an attempt at an elaboration of the visions in the sense of revelation. It was my hypothesis that if I were faithful to the call, doing the best I could, I would then free myself," unquote. Nonetheless, his elaboration of the revelation and faithfulness to the call were insufficient. They remained his ethical obligation, and that demanded a further hermeneutics step. He continued, quote, "But only then I saw that this elaboration as revelation did not bring liberation. It became clear to me that I had to return to the human side. I understood that I had to go back to solid land, and that is science. From the insights I had to draw concrete conclusions. from the insights, I had to draw concrete conclusions. I have given my life for it. The elaboration in the Red Book was necessary, but this also led to an insight into the ethical obligation. I have paid with my life, and I have paid with my science. Unquote. To that statement, Jung added a final verdict. Quote, the first thing freed me one way or the other, unquote. The elaboration of Liber Novus in the form of revelation freed Jung. He had been faithful to the call, quote unquote, faithful to the call. It also encumbered him with heavy obligations, which he dispersed over the following 40 years with his life and with his science. In accepting the ethical onus laid upon him by Liber Novus, Jung gave birth to an extraordinary hermeneutics of human imagination and its unbounded psychic source. Any comments?
One particular word stands out that I'd never seen before. Jung continued correcting and emending the TypeScript drafts, E-M-E-N-D-I-N-G. And I thought, well, what's the difference between amending and emending? And I looked it up, and emending is modification limited to words only, whereas amending means anything that's modified. And I think that's an interesting inclusion here, kind of a treasure of one where the pictures are not going to be modified. There's a truth in the vision. So the hermeneutics, i.e. the interpretation, is in the text that will follow, but not changing the picture to match some hypothesis. And so what's interesting is then the journey becomes into the picture. And emending would indicate the only modifications, the ethical obligation would be don't change the experience, change the words to describe the experience. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful ethical obligation. I mean, someone walks up and says, you know, have you found so-and-so? I suggest you find so-and-so. Now I can remove the noun, and then that's not my experience, and I shall not change my experience to match your command, because it's not even a suggestion. Because the words, then, well, what's going to happen? No one is bound to the words, they're bound to the experience. And I think there's a piece there, and especially bound, there's a book term. What's the binding? What's the connection? What brings something together? You know, picture tells 1,000 words. Well, that's another way of emending, tell 1,000 words, but the picture's not going to change. So the picture is then, the image, I think, is then this sovereign, fully in charge, commanding principle. And the words, all hermeneutics, basically interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, apocalypse and revelation. I mean, apocalypse doesn't mean a prophecy. It means to uncover.
It
Just like
means
reveal.
to uncomfort.
Uncover, to reveal. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean to foretell the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And then if I look at the word arcana or arcane, arcana just means mystery or hidden. And so in that sense, the apocalypse is revealing the truth of God. I mean, take off the trappings and there you are. I mean, the whole idea of, you know, if you see Buddha on the road, kill him. Well, it's not about murder. You are the divine source. And so if you see it on the road, it means you're seeing a fiction. I mean, destroy the mirage is what it's saying.
Or if somebody's claiming to be the Buddha or the chosen one,
Yes.
chances are they aren't.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, dude. It's only one day a year. It's called Halloween. You know, it's like,
Oh,
but not
okay.
today. That's in October.
I hesitate to do this, but I'm going to get us through the next section because it's such a fun one to talk about. And we probably won't have enough time to talk about it, but we can also think about it for next week. And as I said earlier, there's quite an interesting conversation going on YouTube, and I can't get into it right now because it's so complex, and I don't want to be distracted from our reading and commentary here. So I urge you to read it at your leisure. And so this is called the Three Prophecies, or Three Prophecies. Over the course of his life, Dr. Jung said many strange things. Among them was the above quoted statement to Agnella Jaffe that he had mentally been taken several hundred years into the future. How will one interpret such words? Was this a form of madness, a delusion? Was it a bald-faced falsehood? Was it the testimony of a seer and revelator? Was it in an event of consciousness that future generations will interpret in yet unseen ways? These are questions that must be engaged in a close reading of Liber Novus and in a vigilant evaluation of the man, Carl Gustav Jung. Jung's sense of having seen into the future is documented in Liber Novus. There are several such junctures in his journals, but perhaps the most impressive is the account he entitled The Three Prophecies. He began his transcription of this section into Liber Novus with an introductory comment. Quote, "Wondrous things came nearer. I called my soul and asked her to dive down into the floods whose distant roaring I could hear. This happened on 22 January in the year 1914, as recorded in my black book, and thus she plunged into the darkness like a shot, and from the depths she called out, quote, 'Will you accept what I bring?' Unquote, unquote. This is the only place in the text of Liber Novus where Jung specifically references both his Black Book Journal account and the exact date when the event occurred. Those facts attest to the importance with which he endowed this experience. His soul dived into the depths. She brought back three images: war, magic, and religion. Quote, "From the flooding darkness the son of the earth had brought, my soul gave me ancient things that pointed to the future. She gave me three things: the mystery of war, the darkness of magic, and the gift of religion. These three mean the unleashing of chaos and its power, just as they also mean the binding of chaos. War is obvious, and everybody sees it. Magic is dark, and no one sees it. Religion is still to come, but it will become evident. Did you think that the horrors of such atrocious warfare would come over us? Did you think that magic existed? Did you think about a new religion? I sat up for long nights and looked ahead at what was to come, and I shuddered. Do you believe me? I am not too concerned. What should I believe? What should I disbelieve? I saw and I shuddered. But my spirit could not grasp the monstrous and could not conceive the extent of what was to come. I felt the burden of the most terrible work of the times ahead. I saw where and how, but no word can grasp it, no will can conquer it. I would like to avert my eyes, close my eyes, and deny all my senses. I would like to be someone among you who knows nothing and who never saw anything. It is too much and too unexpected. But I saw it, and my memory will not leave me alone, unquote. Had Jung seen into the future? Whether or not one might now believe him, he rejoined, quote, I am not too concerned. What should I believe? What should I disbelieve? I saw and I shuddered, unquote. War, magic, and religion. War is obvious and it continues. But magic? What is that? In his journal record, it is apparent that at the time Jung was struggling to grasp the nature of magic, the next night, 23 January 1914, the soul compounded his confusion by presenting him with a mysterious magical gift. In bewilderment, he inquired, Magic? What should I do with magic? I don't believe in it. I can't believe in it. The soul replied, Magic will do a lot for you. 4 nights later, his imaginative journey led on to the garden gate of an old magician named Philemon. Philemon had more to teach about magic. In his publication during later years, Jung frequently mentioned magic, usually in the context of primitive peoples' perceptions and interpretation of psychic phenomena. He explained in a 1928 essay, quote, magic is simply another word for psychic, unquote. But of course, for enlightened ones, magic is dark and no one sees it, unquote. And then, quote, and religion is still to come, but it will become evident, unquote. The singular overarching theme of Jung's revelation in Liber Novus is that we stand at the threshold of a new age, synchronous with the turning of the heavens and the passage of the astrological age of Pisces. The 2 millennia long eon, I guess, dominated by Christianity, is now approaching its terminus. In the coming age, the new eon of Aquarius, a new God image and a new religion will eventually take form. This is the proclamation Jung presented on the first folio page of the Red Book. It is the way of what is to come. Okay, comments. War, magic, and religion.
It's interesting to me, the concept of the future here, where what comes to mind is an expanding and contracting present tense. So the horizon coming forward, the horizon expanding beyond my sight, where I feel like he expanded, magically large. And rather than seeing into the future, he saw further than we normally do in any given day. And that kind of aligns with my concept of the third eye isn't blinking. It's lunating, waxing and waning like the moon, so that some parts of the month were more intuitive and some parts were more active. And I think it's, I go to the gas station to fill up my car sometimes, and then I drive it the other times. And I'm wondering if his horizon expanding and contracting, that he kind of blew the boundary and, has the transcendent sensory deprivation chamber kind of connection to all, where relative to now, it's the future. But in that moment, he just simply saw clearly way, way up there as a thought. And then it's not seeing the future, it's just seeing the expanded present of almost history within the moment.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a contradiction in terms, but.
Well, and, we all have such a moment approaching. And that moment is Election Day 2024, November 5th. You can, right now, it's kind of bifurcated. But whichever is the result on that day, all of us can foresee lots of what the future will contain from that moment. Okay, in other words, that will be a seminal moment when, boom, we all see what the future holds or how horrible it will be. Okay, that's what we will see. I mean,
Well, and
I've been seeing it for several years now, but
Mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
well, I was going to say also too, if I step outside, um, um, competitive party politics and look at, well, both sides are always diluted. The right wing and the left wing are part of the same bird. That I'm wondering that the expectations of one, if the other wins, wrong. The expectations of the other side, if the other wins, most likely wrong. Because what's going to happen is what's going to happen. I think what we're seeing is the momentum of the primary drivers. Propaganda. I mean, the media. If the media says it, it's inherently probably not true. I mean, you get Woody Harrelson on Saturday Night Live, who said, well, I had this script, and it was this script, and the crazy drug cartels were going to make you stay at home, and you couldn't leave the house unless you took their drugs and kept taking their drugs. But I threw the script away because who's gonna believe that? And then the next morning, he said it's almost like that script says the media were bought or something. And the next morning, he's demonized as a pothead or whatever, as if, oh, go figure, as if the media were bought. And so, in a sense, he prompted this reactionary piece at a social level instead of the listen and respond, or listen and just ignore. And it's one of those wonderful parodies where dark humor with a straight face telling a story. But it's interesting because the next day there was no other news than slam Woody Harrelson. And I'm going, somebody hit a nerve, so.
Well, and we have to remember that all humor has its origin in the dark side.
And in truth.
In truth, right, but also in things we're not admitting to ourselves. And somebody says it, the court jester gets up and says it because he can get away with it and nobody else can, right?
I was going to say, like, if we think about this situation that you're posing, and I think that we're all witnessing, if it's alchemical, if we are in a collective alchemical vase, it seems to me that we keep getting, calcinato, separatio, and getting to dissolution, but not getting to conjunction, conjunctio. But I think the vessel keeps cracking open, once the alchemical vessel is cracked open, you can no longer have the contents there to be, heated and watched as it progresses. So I think that, whatever happens on election day in the United States, I think that it might well be that we get stuck in a tension of the opposites somehow.
I like your point of,
I'd have to get somewhere.
Yeah,
I might have to get somewhere. Well, I'm beyond calcination. I think it's separatio right now. But if we were to be able to stick with this, what's true on both sides and not escape it in resolution to one or the other.
Well, yeah, because you're so on the money, the current calcination and separation that has no conjunction. And what's interesting about that to me is then the alchemist is absolutely insane trying to achieve different results with the same methods. And so it's one of those, look, the crucible keeps breaking. It breaks at calcination. It breaks at separation. Well, we're not getting to conjunction. Well, it's kind of a fusion that has to recur. And hopefully it's not the literal one. But, the thing about calcinatio is, the white powder, inert, that add water and it catches fire. So instead of water extinguishing fire with calcinatio, you have an opposition in the calcinatio, a seed of that kind of conjunction where, oh, add fire? No, add water and you will get fire. So the question comes back to, in your point well taken, how can we get to the conjunction? What's true on both sides? Besides they're both just squabbling for scraps and lobbying for power. Well, at this point, what substance do the scraps come from? And what substance does that alleged power actually have, other than control and manipulation? The Romans give them bread in circuses, which is okay, distraction. That's a pattern throughout history. The food pyramid, feed them grains 5 to 6 times a day. That's a slave diet. You grain feed pigs and livestock to fatten them up. Well, what do you think is going to happen to the American public? It's obesity epidemic from then. So I think back to conjunction, how do we see through the bread and circuses, honestly, without being volatile? Because the crucible has already been heated. That's a redundant process to add more fire. So you said, but it keeps breaking. They won't join. What's the connection? So I think there's more of an observational ethical obligation to what is now present, rather than who's going to win some high school Lincoln Douglas debate that's gone all wrong.
We need the alchemical third. We need the transcendent function.
Yeah, there you
Right. And when we
Yeah.
all start wearing purple, then things will be wonderful.
Well, and the thing is, purple is then bruised. Purple is injured. It's united, but it's also in the path of healing. So, hematoma, and then
Echomastis.
Yeah, exactly. Except I think we have to avoid compromise, because just like in a relationship, compromise truly means that both people are equally disappointed. And why would you want to mute?
And still mad.
And why would you want to mute a relationship like that? Whereas, how do you mind each other's intensities? So, oh, hey, I got cut, but I'm gonna learn how to help you sharpen that edge. Oh, that directness. Oh, that hit hard. Well, I'm gonna help you make that into a Thor's hammer. Well, maybe I'm gonna duck next time. But at the same time, it's the kind of thing where instead of compromise, can we actually transcend our views to, perfect word there. And there's the verb for the bridge that we don't see. Transcend our expectations. Inspect our expectations. And if I go out looking for yellow cars, what am I going to find? A bunch of yellow cars. But if I go out,
color purple, Skip.
I beg your
Red
pardon?
and blue.
Red and blue together.
Yeah, purple is red and blue together.
Oh, so just because of the two colors coming together?
Yes.
That's
In the U.S.,
Well,
we have the parties are signified by the two separate colors.
Yeah.
Red is one side, blue is the other side.
Right.
Right.
And
But there's no red, white, and blue. That's the thing. Where's the white is the
I really appreciated Dr. Owens mentioning that, there's a price to pay. Well, from my understanding of what you've just read is that there's a price to pay in sort of making yourself vulnerable in a way that you're sharing your experiences in these parallels with the shadow. And so his persona was still Jung, right? Because that's what he is all about. when Freud was when Jung was working with Freud, it was there that Jung found independence in his own understanding of psychoanalysis. And so now he's redefining his archetype in these experiences of his autobiography, you know, like what this is what happened. And this is how I reacted to it. But on a deeper level, this is how it impacted me in a conscious, subconscious, and unconscious way. And all of the experiences that he had to endure physiologically and psychologically, and internal filtering those sensations and those events to internalize and understand himself in the predicament of the circumstances of the here and the now of his moment in time during his lifetime.
Yeah. Great point to wind up with. What I wanted to bring to everybody's attention was one version of the song One Voice, which I simply love, but it's where we're all going. As Paul Simon said, we're bound singing for Graceland in his song Graceland. You know, we're all going to be accepted there, right? And he says, I have reason to believe we'll all be accepted in Graceland, right? And so I have just found this particular rendition of this song not only beautiful, but summative of where we're going and the sacrifices that we need to make in order to get there. And you know, you can say that some people have sort of a skewed vision. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't care about all the, you know, the enormity of the deaths that he's causing with his war. And sure, they can blame it on the Palestinians, but at the beginning, but you know, what they're doing is not a solution. Okay. They're creating one or more new generations of people that will absolutely hate Israel. And that's not the answer. Okay. These people that live in the Levant are not so very different. Okay. They're the pathways through Islam or Judaism or Christianity all had their origins in the same place. And they're all pointing to the same place. And that's summarized in this song, which I'll leave to you to watch.
You know, I think we have to be careful about having one voice, because there's the murder of the melting pot. Let's make mud of everything, take out the high and the low, and average the average, and make sure everything is damn boring. Well, what about cultural awareness and curiosity or I want to learn more about the intensity of your
Right.
culture.
All those things have to happen, right?
And I think
I,
rather than
I'm not saying that we're going to sing in one voice because it's my way or the highway. That's not the answer, and it won't be
no, and
the answer.
that's where I'm
Right.
going, is where I'm going
Right.
with this is that the one voice is I shall transcend my views. I do not need to make conflict with your dissenting views. I need to listen more deeply to what you have. I don't need to do
Right.
anything about it. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to accept it. I don't need to agree or disagree. Like the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, his big concept, dignity in difference.
Yeah.
And what happens,
Yeah.
that's an intellectual and actionable expression of curiosity and wonderment, that invisible bridge in real time that's actionable. It's
Yeah.
something that has no form, yet we can utilize it. And I think that there's the transcendent function of not me just chomping at the bit, waiting for my turn to talk when you're saying something that's upsetting me. It's the maturity to understand this is upsetting me. Why? And that's mine. That's
Yeah,
not
one of
not
the
you.
things that Deb and I do often is we watch these programs called The Universe, where they're talking about the evolution of the universe. And one thing that is clearly clear there is that probably in significantly less than 5 billion years, there will be no Earth anymore. There will be no Earth, nor anything that has ever existed on Earth. They will be gone. And if you extrapolate it out farther, ultimately everything is pulled apart. And as one of the astronomers said, it'll be the great RIP, the great rest in peace, that will relate to the entire universe, because everything will pull apart and be separate. And, the question is, how do all species get to that point where there is no more? I mean, what's it going to be like? Let's say 1,000 years before the end, whatever is the end.
It's interesting that
What's it going to be like to live in that universe?
really aligns
Probably
actually.
global warming will take us down before we take ourselves down, hopefully. Climate change.
One could hope.
A
Not
few
touches.
drownings and excruciating, burning, boiling waters
Yeah.
from volcanoes.
Well,
under ocean volcanoes.
there's something that I think it's the IPET, that the individual planet evolution theory, that every planet in our galaxy is a state of the history of Earth, Venus being where we were, Mars being desolate where we're going, and 5 billion years kind of thing, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then Pluto, look at the frozen ice cube hanging out. But it's interesting because whether it's true or not, we can again look at the dignity of the difference and where are we now and how can we live it.
The sun is also a star, so let's not forget that huge
It's
black
got
hole.
It has a life cycle. It has a life cycle.
Yeah,
it will expand slowly. It's not going to supernova. It's just going to expand, and then
it's going to get awful warm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're gonna get shredded.
Yeah.
But I think, with war, it's like when I was growing up in former Yugoslavia, and then we had to travel back and forth with the whole war around us in other countries. So my being from Slovenia, the same country as Melania. Being from there, we didn't really witness the war because we're still tied in with the Austro-Hungarians. But you know, it was just this disillusionment with power, and I think right now with this need of becoming purple, I just feel that right now at this time I'm living in this society where it's very egocentric and it's heavily influenced by social media and marketing and these new social group cliques that just keep getting weirder and weirder. And I'm so confused, and I feel sorry for anyone who's growing up in emerging adulthood with this disillusioned, disconnected, egocentric generation.
Well, I think Brian's word, floundering, that comes up.
Yeah, well, we're all floundering. That's right.
And so I think the whole floundering and whining, moaning, bitching about it all the time in the media versus, yeah, I'm floundering, but you know, it's like George O'Keefe said, I was terrified every moment of my life and it never stopped me from doing a damn thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Well, one of the things that we're talking about here is how to be at peace with ourselves and with our world that we've been born into. And again, just to reiterate Yafe's point, the whole point of Jungian psychology is to give us access to the healing power of the unconscious. And that's what I hope we do here every week when we're talking. I mean, we're hoping to provide a portal into the healing power of the unconscious of everyone. And, we don't take a position on the rightness or wrongness of anybody's religion. At least I don't, because they all do the same thing as what I'm talking about. And, I know when I was a deacon in the Reformed Church back when I was 30 years old, every week when I came out of church, I felt better. Okay. And I can, in retrospect, look back on it and say I felt healed. And then, I had these experiences with people using the power devil to force people back into religion that happened in my family. And I had a very negative experience with Christianity as a result for about a decade. But now I've come to realize that, the same teachings that cause that also can cause healing. Yeah, not the teaching somebody to go out and tell people that they're going to hell. I think that's just the power devil talking. But
Actually, I think that's the powerless devil talking.
yeah,
those people often have a love of power because I think they've rarely had any. They don't know how to be a dangerous human being and have it completely under control, meaning I'm not going to die in the wild.
but the problem is by using it's not powerless because, when I had my experience with Mephistopheles, and the devil literally appeared in the seat next to me for not very long, for about 5 seconds maybe, but I was traveling at 55 miles an hour and the road was clear. But if the road had been icy or something, that teaching that was laid on me by being told you're going to hell could have actually caused me to have an accident very easily. Okay. In other words, if that vision had if that vision had stunned me and caused me to spin out, and I have seen cars spin out on that highway in the wintertime. I've literally seen a car in front of me that spun around 360 degrees. That's just not on. That's the power devil.
Well, and I think actually there are two different devils here. There's a power devil, which is negative and to me weak and avoidant. And then there's the one you experienced, which was numinous and powerful. But I think this, don't do that, you're going to go to hell. That to me is people showing weakness and incredulity, untrustworthy. They are avoiding the future because they're avoiding now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do this. Why? Because they're consequences. They're avoiding, I don't think, the thing of hell. I think it's a clouded smoke and mirrors avoiding consequences, because one of the
or
responsibility.
I think the person who said that to me what was actually unconsciously intending to punish me. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean that,
right.
try to get us the shame.
Yeah. And it's so complex, but
and they were close to you too, so you almost cannot not take it intensely because you love and listen.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. I mean, betrayal always comes from within. I mean, the whole keep your friends close and your enemies closer, it used to always perplex me. It's like, that's stupid. I mean, it's slow blade really quickly, won't even see it coming. The reality is, though, you have no trust relationship with enemies. So they can't betray you. They don't even like you. They probably don't even think about you that much, frankly. I mean, people shouldn't flatter themselves that much. But I think what happens is that circle of enemies, when you have an incoming from a friendly, they're going to part like the Red Sea and open up, and you'll go, incoming, because they want you to fail. So you can use them as a radar forensic, metaphorically there, and understand that, then actually maybe I don't need to keep my enemies closer. I need to have a better sense of situational awareness. So the responsibility to what is, not what I smoking the narcotic of hope wish it is.
I had a similar experience, Skip, when the plane was in such heavy turbulence and we just kept dropping and dropping, and I could feel my heart in my throat and my guts like just floating above my head. And there was an empty seat between myself and the air marshal. I guess the air marshal at this point was so tired of sitting by the window or in the middle, he just sat in the aisle. And I remember, like, I just awoke from a nap, and they're serving coffee and biscuits or lunch or something. And I woke up to the smell of coffee because I am obsessed with coffee. It must be the Arab in my blood. But, as soon as I smelled the coffee, I went, whoop, I woke up. And the flight attendant, she's like, oh, look who decided to wake up. And I went, ooh, coffee. And then the turbulence just went, and she's like, well, I guess I'm going to have to put the coffee back. So fortunately, in our aisle, we were able to get our coffee, but then we were the last ones to get coffee. And so she went all the way to the back, and they all started seatbelting. But by the time the other flight attendant reached the back, she ended up flying. So anyone who didn't, I always keep my seatbelt on unless I have to get up for the restroom, but I always keep my seatbelt on because I'm just naturally, I don't know if it's from my persona, but I'm just naturally, growing up during the war, just naturally very all about protecting myself and safety first. And so I kept my seatbelt on. But just the turbulence of just dropping and the pilot, using all of his professional pilot skills And I remember that moment, just like Loyola, I had this moment where I was just, like anyone else actually, when you're at that point of life and death, and you cannot control this, it's just happening. And it's sort of like, oh, God, please, not today. So I'm sitting between the air marshal and I'm like, no, I don't want to die, but I have to graduate and my graduation ceremony, and oh my God, all my hard work is just gonna be buried with me. Are you kidding me? I'm like, no, not today. And the air marshal's like, and this, again, going back to this younger generation, when I was studying developmental psychology before I found out about Jung, and so I was reading all these theories in development, and I remember I said to myself, I think maybe I'll do art therapy instead, because I come from, I prefer my mother's more creative, artistic side of the family instead of the more concrete, mathematical, scientific part. And so this one girl, she's sitting next to me at the coffee shop, and she's like, oh, what are you looking at? And I look at her and I say, oh, hi, yeah. So I'm looking at a graduate program in art therapy. And she looks at me and she's like, well, I'm actually doing an assignment on art therapy. And I replied to her that, if she ever would like, she could always send me a message on social media. On Twitter, I think it was, send me a message on Twitter and let me know if you need someone to help you with your art therapy stuff. I'm really into that whole, dreams and unconscious stuff. She's like, yeah, sure, if you even know what you're talking about. And so after that, she comes back to the coffee shop, because it was like my routine to come there. And she tells me, well, I don't think you should study art therapy in graduate school, because that's what I'm doing. And I look at her and I'm like, I had no idea that
only room for
we're
one.
in the same household or something. I'm confused. What do you mean by that? And so she was living in this egocentric bubble where it was, her against the world. And I'm just like, I think there's plenty of time, and there are already so many people who do art therapy. We're not going to be exactly the same. Maybe I might have water painting, right? And you might have water painting, but we might have a different approach and a different set of clients. And it just freaked her out that I was interested in the art therapy graduate program, and she was also pursuing that. And she became so obsessed with this assignment. And then after that week, the next few weeks forward, I just kept meeting young people that were around her age group, like her cohort. Oh, I don't want this. I can't believe it. Oh, I'm manifesting. The manifestation is not working. I'm using guided imagery and it's not working. This is not what I want. This is not my imagery. This is not my manifestation. And oh my gosh, I'm just so it's so mind-boggling to me. And what Jordan was saying about, being cruel and et cetera, I don't think I'm cruel. I think I'm a very fair person. When it came to my religion, I became more like a little bit introverted with my religion, because I didn't feel comfortable in the way that others were antagonizing it. And so I just sort of kept to myself. And when someone else would speak of my religion, I would just listen to them and hear their understanding of holidays and traditions. And there's so much to learn when you're just quiet. There's so much to learn, and there's so much to learn where, just as Jordan was saying, when the mosquito is in a place like on your eyeball or something on your eyelid, and you can't smack your eyelid because that hurts. So you just have to, get in that water, like at Jones Beach. We have these huge waves. Get into the water. And, if the waves are coming at you, you got to figure out how to get through it, because at the end of the day, whatever political party you are, we still have our, as Abraham Maslow said, our basic human needs, right? We all want basic human needs. And this with status and sect and all this stuff, I am just grateful every single day to God, to my God, that I have a roof over my head, that I have food in my refrigerator, that I don't have, that I have supportive people in my life, that I have, I'm not battling with things that I cannot seek help for. And maybe I don't have the best health insurance, but I have health insurance. And, I'm just grateful every day, and I will just accept it, and whatever comes my way, even though whatever I'm putting out into the universe, if it's not, it'll catch on to me eventually. My blessings will come to me eventually. It will all pay off soon.
Your religious introversion piece to me is a way to describe having discretion, because it's personal and it's not anyone else's business. So there's a lot of the people there you're talking about, and they don't have boundaries. They confess everything. They tell everyone everything. They're just an open faucet, mostly of a lot of sewage half the time, all the time. But their version of manifestation is, well, I stared at pictures of Audi R8s and Lamborghinis, and I'm not having results. And I look at them, and it's like, that's the adult version of Santa Claus. And your Santa wish list is just visual. What have you done about it? So, I mean, it's a matter of either Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin, who said, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Amen.
And then the thing is, you don't talk about the hard work, you just go do it. And the thing is, then you're actively and actionably living your life. And what happens? Well, you discover more and more treasure and opportunity. Not because I stared at a vision board poster on the wall. That vision board might be there just to keep me focused on, yes, I want these things, or I'm going to amend or emend these as I go along. But
as a reminder too, because sometimes overworking and burnout can really, make you forget, where you're headed.
And also, overworking and burnout, when you're tired, you fight demons that you long ago conquered. And so there's a boundary there of, if I'm fighting something from the past, I need to take a rest, because that's already been done. It's redundant for me to do it again. And that's, to me, the universe saying, hey, Jordan, are you still a dumbass? Are you going to rest? Are you going to rest your way and come back? Or are you going to keep going and wonder why, this is a rerun of season 2 of my life or whatever? I mean, it's like, no, it's time. No, I think I got to go home right now. Take a nap, go home, eat, have water, whatever.
But I did, I do still keep very close to my community, my religious community. And when I was going through several life challenges all at once in my late 20s, I confided in a Sufi mystic, and what he had told me healed me, literally healed me. And I can't say that about medications or cures or whatever. It healed me in so many ways: spiritual, metaphysical, mental, emotional. Just in reality, it healed me in every single way. And he told me to say a prayer, and the prayer is La Allahu illallah, and it basically is to open the door, right? To open the door to whatever situation is happening. Because what I love about my religion, just like, you know, any other religion that has communions, is that we all come together and we're saying the same thing and we're doing it at the same time in the same ritual. You know, when we're praying, men put their hands up here, women put their hands down there, we kneel, we stand, and we say the standard opening prayer, and then we choose our dua or surah. And so I opened the door to not being alone in whatever this conflicting situation is. And I said, La ilaha illallah, in every single situation that I felt was out of my control, in every situation that was a threat to me, like a perceived threat to me. And right away the doors opened, and you know, I could feel this metaphysical support, the spiritual support from my community. And you know, that to me is my sort of gentle loving kindness to myself, my little hug to myself. And you're gonna be okay. You know, you are loved. You will be supported. Help is on the way. But also, if I'm wrong, you will be punished and you will reap what you sow.
Well, you know,
Bernie's coming with the cane and the whoop, so be prepared to learn your
well,
lesson.
That's responsibility, to understand consequences. And I love that. Just open the door, because if you open the door for yourself, you are giving to yourself more. And if you open the door for another, you're giving opportunity to them to flow forward. So I love that. Open the door. That's a wonderful way to actually, in spare few words, say it. Now, open the door. Or don't open the door. And that's an action too. But what happens is the door is the portal to the next moment every single time. Sometimes I want to steep in this moment. So my action,
whatever that portal goes to, that's where it is. And just as Lao Tzu once said in The Art of War, leave one door open.
There you go.
Yeah, and the architect says, you know, if one door closes, open it. That's what doorknobs are for. You know, it doesn't like you have to sit there, the door closed. Well, open it. And if you don't like it, remodel it, move it somewhere else, make a window, plaster it over. So I think a lot of times the door closes and a window opens. It's kind of a false sense of control. The door closes, so I have to respond to that's a no. I'm like, that was my door. How it can't be closed. You don't have the key. So, I mean, it's like, I think just staying on the concept of the door, whether it's open, closed, ajar, unhinged, then it's a portal. I mean, so that prayer of, you know, open the door really goes somewhere.
Yep. And so I've while you've all been talking, I've been using my hourglass here, and it's quite a unique hourglass because it has both green and red in it. And every time I flip it over, I actually thought it lasted for 2 minutes, but it actually only lasts for 1 minute. And I've been sort of fascinated by it and
nice.
Obviously the doors are opening and closing here as they go. And you wonder whether the green or the red can go down the center, but the truth is they both can go down the center. Anyway, it lasts 1 minute, and I've been trying to decide when to cut this off, but I'm now going to make it
Now
bring this to an end.
so we keep opening the doors and making more doors to open more doors. It's like, yeah, there's a point with, okay, there's next week.
Okay, see you next week. We're going to continue with Lance Owens' writing next week.
And thanks for being here, Mela.
Yeah, thank you.